Welcome everyone, thanks for coming today and viewing into our video that we're making of our Wood County ADAMHS Youth Survey results. We're doing this a little bit different in format than we have in the past with our public release, and we're going to be live on the radio next week. At the same time, we're going to release this video, so you can visit our website and learn about the results that we learned from the students here in grades 5 through 12 in Wood County. So without further ado, we have our evaluator here, Dr. Bill Ivasco. So welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Con. I'd like to present then all of our data, and thank you, Kyle, for introduction, and thank all of you who are actually viewing in. Appreciate your attention and interest in the project. There's also a book that it's got 130 so pages of all of what we're about to share, and a briefer barometer summary of everything we're about to share along with this PowerPoint. So let me start by giving you the highlights immediately of, I'll give you the highlights of what we found. We've been doing this survey now since 2004, so almost 20 years, 10 times. 10th survey, 18 years apart, that this is the lowest drug use that kids have reported ever. Everything has been in decline, and we were wondering during the pandemic, would we see an increase or decrease? Well, what we saw was a decrease in literally all substances except for two, really. Caffeinated energy drinks continue to go up. Edibles went up in marijuana, but some other types of marijuana went down. And the use of narcotic painkillers seemed to be up a little bit. It wasn't high to begin with, but it's trending upwards. The second thing we found, that was the good news. The bad news, we found that all mental health indicators were going in the wrong direction. Kids were experiencing more stress in all of our measures, greater suicide ideation, suicide attempts, greater bullying, more adverse childhood experiences in the home, and those are of concern to us. And the third area that we looked at was gambling and gaming. Yes, we assumed the kids gamed a lot more. Obviously, they were home on their consoles and their smartphones and their tablets, and they did game more, but it wasn't disordered. It didn't seem to be preoccupation that it interfered with their life. On the other hand, gambling went up significantly, and we also saw an increase in disordered gambling from a little less than 3% to almost 7%. So perhaps all this interest in FanDuel and DraftKings and other types of online gambling services are really starting to grab hold, and that could be a concern for the future. So let me go through right away now. That's the highlights. Let me give you the more detail of each of the things. Here's what we just mentioned. Increases in caffeinated energy drinks, narcotic painkillers, and the edibles, but decreases in literally every other substance, and that was great to see. Well, we saw increases in our mental health, bullying, suicide, the ACEs, and gambling and gaming. And the only decrease was some of the attitudes about marijuana. Vaping has been the rage, so to speak, in the United States in the past 40 years or so. And we combined, did you ever vape nicotine, vape marijuana, or vape flavors? And we see that vaping really increased 2 years ago in 2020. It went from 17 to 27% among seniors, but now it's dropped back. So that's a good thing. We saw some of that decline. When we asked what's in that vaping device, here you can see the any vaping is in blue, but the nicotine seems to be the favored drug of choice, followed by THC, or marijuana, amongst the senior class. So you see nicotine vaping at 18%, THC at almost 12%. The great news is cigarettes is only 1.7%, and that was at, 40% in 2004. It's come down to literally doesn't even exist anymore in Wood County or amongst the school-age population. Back to that, but that doesn't mean we've gotten rid of nicotine. Nicotine is now being delivered at 18.1% via a vaping device rather than a cigarette, and 18% among cigarette use was what we saw back in 2008 and 2010. So while we've declined the cigarette delivery of nicotine, we've replaced it with the vaping delivery system of nicotine. But we lost, so we thought we had made great headway, coming all the way down from the 18 to 1 in cigarette smoking, but like I said, it came back in the vaping of nicotine. So there we have nicotine vaping. It had gone up to 22, the red line, and now it's back down to 18% in 2022. Marijuana had gone from almost non-existent, only 2%, to 13%, but now back down to 11.8 or almost 12%. So those are some good things. We were wondering why these declines occurred, and we thought there could be really 4 reasons why we're seeing some of this. One would be access. Kids can't get substances like they might have had access to in the past when they were out around in the world. Second, they're less likely to be influenced by their peers because they're probably at home. So number 3, they have a far greater parent influence, which is usually a more positive thing. And the 4th reason, we'd like to believe that all of the on-site prevention specialists that we've had in the schools providing lessons maybe started to percolate a little bit when kids were at home and they got to thinking about the dangers and the drugs and alcohol use. Good thing it came down. I don't know whether that means it'll be sustained into the future. The University of Michigan asked a question that we did not ask, and that question was, did you use less, more, or about the same during the pandemic? The kids who were already users said they didn't change. But the rates went down, which means that fewer kids probably initiated substance use, and some people quit, but we most likely saw a lack of initiation rather than a cessation of current users. So some kids probably quit, fewer kids started, and that's enough to bring the rate down. Will that be sustained into the future? I don't know. Delaying the onset of drug use is always good. It leads to lower use or non-use. But now that they're back out in schools again and in the community again where they can get access to things, have different values, we don't know what we'll see. So could be fleeting, could be long-term. We'll know in a few more years. Alcohol use, the lowest it's ever been. Look at that, back 60% in 2012. And I took off a few years here because we have too many lines. Back in 2004, that was 80.5% of kids saying they drank in the last year. Now down to only 35%. Less than half of where it was at the beginning of our survey work and at the very beginning of prevention efforts in the community. We'd like to believe that we had a big part of making that difference. Same with drinking in the past month, down from 37, which was actually at 50%, down to 21% among seniors. So kids were drinking a lot less during the pandemic. Marijuana use in general came down. And this, by the way, isn't just in Wood County. We saw some of this nationally, and we're reflecting what we saw in the rest of the communities as well. And here's my concern about vaping, edible use. We asked kids, have they ever had edibles in the past 30 days? And our rates in 18 and 20 were about 8%, 7.7, almost double, over double, to 16.9%. I shared these results with local law enforcement yesterday, and they confirmed it. Yes, they're seeing edibles about more now than they had in the past as well. So it could be the ease of access. We're close to Michigan where you can get edibles. Maybe some of that is access and the ability to obtain these substances. Not necessarily a drug, but maybe a junior varsity drug, a trainer drug. The use of caffeinated energy drinks has been going up considerably in all grade levels all throughout the county. 50% of the kids say they drink caffeinated energy drinks, and maybe that has something to do with the gaming experience that we're seeing. I wanted to point out heroin because some people think when we had the opioid epidemic that the opioid epidemic had gone into the schools as well. It has not. We've never seen kids using heroin in Wood County. Oh, a few. I'm saying maybe a dozen or so would have tried it once, but we don't see any kind of a epidemic like the adult community experienced a few years ago. What we do see, though, is an increase in the misuse of narcotic painkillers. And we saw that increase a little bit from 20 to 22. And again, not a significant amount, but 7-8%. And that could be access at the home. Maybe if I'm home and I'm able to get in all the cupboards and closets, I'll find something like that before, and maybe that's where some of that is increasing. I'm not sure what the reason for that is, but narcotic painkiller use, 30-day use, is up a little bit. So that's the end of the substance use. Here's a little bit about the mental health concern. 10 years ago, Bill Donnelly was the director of the Children's Resource Center here in Bowling Green. And when a child was admitted to the CRC, they would take a psychological inventory to show where their symptoms were, and they could range from I have no problems to I have severe or intense problems. Bill wanted us to take that inventory and give it to the general population. See what kids are like that are not going to the CRC, what they're like in a regular community. So we've been doing that for a while, and we saw some significant things in this past year. During the pandemic, the number of kids reporting moderate problems, severe problems, and intense problems has gone up. You can see from 7.8% to almost 10% to 13% combining these last two. So kids were indicating to us that there is some stress in their lives. That's a concern because the more likely you exhibit mental health symptoms, the more likely you could engage in substance use or substance misuse. For example, that narcotic painkiller we were talking about, this is the annual use, less than 2% of kids that have no problems use those, but nearly 17% of the kids who report intense problems might misuse something, and all substances are like that. Bullying was increasing. We thought cyber would probably increase because kids were home online, and it did. But so did bullying, verbal bullying, and so did physical bullying, surprisingly. This reminds me of my sister. Maybe when she got mad, she punched me in the arm. Maybe that's what's happening here. Some kids were getting involved in physical bullying from the stress that they were experiencing at home or in the community. I don't know, but we're seeing it trending in the wrong direction. Suicide ideation. The highest, that black line is 2022, the highest we've ever recorded in Wood County. Kids saying they've thought about hurting themselves or killing themselves. And the highest number of attempted suicides as well, particularly in 11th grade. Some of the other lines were higher at one time back in 2012, but still that line is near the top of all the years that we've been collecting data. So mental health concerns, bullying concerns, suicide ideation, all in the wrong direction. And some of that could be reflected of what we call ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. We ask kids in the last year or at home, do you have anybody that have you ever had any physical abuse, emotional abuse, or sexual abuse, neglect in any way? Or is there household dysfunction? Mom is being treated badly. Somebody is on drugs or an alcoholic. Someone is struggling with mental illness or has been incarcerated or arrested. And we've been tracking these in 18, 20, and 22. And in 22, literally every one went up, except for divorce. Otherwise, all of them went up. For example, someone struggling with mental illness started at 19, now up to 26.6. That doesn't mean that the school-age youth is experiencing that. That means that they perceive someone at home is experiencing that. Now, I don't think kids can diagnose that their mom and dad have a mental illness, but their perception is somebody's struggling with that, whether they are truly and they've heard that diagnosis being discussed, or whether they just think mom and dad are crazy, I don't know. But the perception is clearly there, and kids are obviously picking up some of their stressors at home, and we're seeing that as well. And as ACEs go up, so too do these kinds of negative behaviors. Someone who reports none of those problems at home might still be thinking about suicide or attempting suicide. But boy, if you have 3 and 4 of those kinds of experiences at home, your life is much more stressful and much more likely to exhibit some of these kinds of at-risk behaviors than they would when you have none of those ACEs at home. That's the end of the mental health portion. Our third portion is on gambling and gaming. And gaming and gambling can become addictive, and that's why we're pursuing this now. Gaming activity, working on a console, a laptop, or any other kind of phone or whatever, we saw it increase. The red line is 22 among 5th graders, 6th graders, 7th graders. Usually in the upper classes it goes down because kids get involved in other activities, but clearly the younger kids were involved more in gaming. But we asked them to take a gaming disorder test, and we found that kids, while they're gaming a lot, don't seem to be dysfunctional because of it, where their grades are suffering or they're lying to their parents or some other negative kinds of things. Gambling, on the other hand, look at gambling. As you play cards, skill, betting on sports, lottery, scratch-offs, and then what a lot of young kids do today, fantasy sports, and the newest thing, esports. The orange line there is 22, and you saw a significant jump in gambling in this past period of time. 11th and 12th grade males is our target market. They are the most likely to be gambling, and usually in sports-related kind of gambling, and we also notice that they do a lot of gaming. Unlike gaming, gambling disorder seems to be real. We asked them to take a gambling disorder test to see if they are lying or doing some dysfunctional things in gambling. And yes, we saw that increase from 2.7 to 6.7%. So again, like I mentioned earlier, the idea of getting involved in FanDuel, DraftKings, all these online gambling sites that are being advertised and marketed directly to kids, that are exciting for kids, could be the breeding ground of some future disordered gambling as an adult. So while the delay of onset appeared in drug use, and we're feeling optimistic about that for the future, there doesn't seem to be a delay of onset in gambling. That seems to be real, and maybe that's going to build up even more so, particularly with the legalization of additional sports gaming in 2023 that was just passed in Ohio. So we'll have to keep an eye on gambling, because that might be something that is going to become more prevalent. When kids game, they can buy what we call a loot box or a treasure chest, and you can hopefully maybe get a new sword or a skin or something that will help you in your game. We ask kids if they ever spent money on those kinds of things. I would suppose it's a little bit more dysfunctional if you're doing that daily or weekly, just maybe not now and again. And most kids say no, they don't gamble in their games, but some kids do, about what? 4.6%, and there's the actual number of kids reporting they're doing this on a daily or weekly basis. That's concerning. We ask them, and here are some more, the questions to see, is that purchase of a loot box dysfunctional? Again, I never mind when kids do something, but I'm wondering also, is it in your mind and dysfunctional in some ways? So we ask them, do you play longer than you intend to so you can win those boxes? Do you chase your losses? And do you find it exciting and thrilling when you keep buying more? And we again see the same kind of numbers. There are some kids who are getting involved in that, and that's grades 5 through 12 combined. Most kids never, but we're seeing some of that dysfunction occurring in the gaming, gambling combination world, sometimes called gambling. We're seeing some of that. The last thing we thought was of interest is we asked, well, maybe kids just like being online more. Maybe online life is more exciting than face-to-face life. Maybe as an adult, we need to learn more about this. So we asked these three questions. Do you see yourself more valuable online than in real life? Do you see you're respected more online than in real life? And you communicate better online than in real life? And that's while you're gaming, by the way. That's not just like in Facebook or Snapchat. This is during a game. We found that most kids disagreed with those statements. Some strongly agreed, but amongst those kids that did a lot of gaming, 2 hours a day, they report, I game 2 hours every day, 38% agreed with those statements. So the gamer is starting to see himself or herself in a whole different self-identity than. And here's our summary, and you can read through that, and we've kind of reflected it already.
So now that we have the new data, the new youth survey data has been released, what's that mean to us as a group? Maybe we should all kind of talk about what it means to our community.
Well, I'll tear into it first. How's that? Since my role is Director of Youth Prevention Education in the schools, as we mentioned at the end of Bill's report, we take that data now and we sit down amongst ourselves and amongst our staff, and we start looking at that data and analyzing it to see what does it really mean. Okay, we know that Bill said we had a decrease in alcohol, tobacco, and other drug. Was that pandemic related? Was it because they really didn't have access to peers and friends? Did we really delay the onset of youth using and experimentation and trying for the first time? Is that going to carry over? That was a great question that he presented. And we build on that, and we keep going. I think one of the neat things is that we have longitudinal data with this survey, the ADAMHS survey since 2004, that shows over time, certainly shows over time, that the prevention education programs that we've initiated has lowered our usage of substance use. That speaks volumes in the area of the kids, the resiliency, the things the kids learned from us pre-pandemic and carried into the pandemic may have held true. It also may mean that there was a lack of access, especially amongst our younger youth who didn't maybe have the opportunity to get out of the house. Some of the older ones might have. So those are some immediate things. But then, as I said earlier, we need to take that data and look at it by grade level, and then start designing, okay, if marijuana really spiked in a certain grade, we can target our education to that group of kids for next year and really give them some more information that may help them make better decisions in the future. And that's how we've really run this program from the beginning, is looking at the trend data and building off of that.
You know, Kyle, I'll reaffirm what you just said about the Prevention Coalition making a difference. When you first started here, we had one of the very first programs we created was Life Skills. Mm-hmm. Life Skills program teaches kids to be more resilient and have a better self-esteem and navigate that difficult world of drug use. For example, if a kid goes to a party and his friends want him to drink, he doesn't want to drink, how can he get out of that without losing faith and feeling bad about himself and bad with his other kids? So we teach him things. Well, your predecessor, Lori, couldn't begin the entire county, so we only hit certain schools and certain grades.
That's right.
That year I happened to give the survey, and I was able to differentiate the results of those kids who had life skills from those kids who didn't have life skills. Now, you can't do that experimental design today. We can't just deny some kids treatment and give everybody else treatment. But back then, it actually happened because of the way we rolled out the program. And sure enough, we found out it was very effective.
Yes.
Those kids who had life skills had much lower rates than those kids who didn't have life skills. And it already began the very beginnings of showing that, yes, this program does make a difference. Kids need to hear that good message. They need something to think about and some ammunition mentally, a tool to go to when they have a struggle. So, great job.
As somebody new coming into all of this in the last 6 months, I can definitely say there's no denying the data that's there and how it trends down sequentially, down, down, down. So I tend to be in the camp of most definitely the prevention education is working, most definitely. And I know Angie, you've probably seen since you've been here more than what I've been able to observe here in the last few months, but.
Yeah, I've been here 7, almost 8 years, and so I'm the mental health person, I guess, of our team, and so we look at the suicide numbers and suicide ideation and attempts, and it's easy to become concerned about that, and I am concerned about those. But I'm also hopeful in that 2 years ago, the ADAMHS board gave us additional funding or asked the provider agencies to offer more programming around suicide prevention specifically. And we stepped up and offered 2. CRC is offering 2 programs, and from last year to this year, we've doubled the number of schools that are using that just so far this year. And I know that there are some that are going to continue to use those programs in the spring even. So I think that we kind of saw it coming and are ahead of it. So then, you know, the numbers aren't great, especially suicide ideation. That I don't know that you can help a lot. I mean, if people think about suicide, that's one thing that kind of happens. But attempting suicide, that's the one that I really want to look at and say, you know, are our programs affecting that? And I think they will. And I feel hopeful that we've already implemented those programs and have them going and have them planned into the spring. So I feel like we're addressing that problem before we knew exactly that it was
And we can look
going to
at,
go up.
and we can look at, and you and I will, which genders how they might differ, and which grades differ, and you can get a better idea of where your, like Kyle mentioned, where your problems are and where they're less likely and where you should focus your attention. And back to Kyle, when you talked about the survey is great, I love it, but that's not what it's about. What it's about is what we're doing right now, the discussion of it and taking the results and doing something with it. Getting it to the ADAMHS board and delivering new programs, going to the CRC and getting prevention or mental health counselors into the schools. That's what this is all about. It's just a stepping stone to get into doing something proactive within your community to make the kids more resilient and healthier.
And the other side of that is all of this can't be done by the schools alone. We need the community support. We need adult education, community education, and that's where Tina, with the Drug-Free Community Grant, complements our whole program, because she can address K through adulthood, and where we're kind of locked into school age. So
Definitely, and the data helps support things that we kind of suspected and maybe didn't suspect, helps us understand which direction to go. But the other part too, I was asked the question about heroin the other day and why we weren't more focused on it. And I said, well, the data that we have right now from 2020 isn't telling us that that's the drug of choice, so to speak. And, you know, we have an idea of where our focus should be. And I said, who knows when the 2022 data comes out? So here it came out, and again, it's supporting, no, that's not. And even though alcohol's down, it's still a drug of choice. So it still has to be a focus. And we look at the issue of being able to get painkillers. We suspected that was an issue. We bought more Deterra. We've been trying to push the Deterra, so to speak. And we've got some programs lined up to help us get out into the community. And it's good to know that, hey, that data supports that that's a viable concern in our community.
Yeah.
So.
And we live right here. Another big area is Bowling Green State University. And they have programs just like we have for the college students. And again, being a little older, back when I was younger, people would think college kids did all the drinking and it trickled down to the high school. Now you might wonder, well, what are the high school kids bringing into the university? You know, and it looks like they're going to be bringing some more gaming, maybe some more gambling.
and vaping.
And vaping.
Vaping, yes.
And so we work collaboratively with BGSU and letting them know here's where we are and what's headed your way and how we can work together as them being a valued member of the community.
That's true, because the coalition deals certainly with the youth in the community, but then the community at large as well too. And I know we just took a box of lollipops that say tobacco stinks and set them out on a table because the Wellness Connection there wants to utilize them at an event coming up, because cigarette smoking is a little more prevalent still with the college age students here. So where do we go from here in terms of, we kind of got our sense of what the priority is, where do we go from here?
I would think we would want to share our results. They obviously have heard it, but with the ADAMHS board, since mental health was an issue, I think they'd like to be aware of that. We have professional grant writers in the staff here. We can look at our issues, share it with them, and see what kind of resources and planning we want to come up with for mental health. would be one I would suggest.
And another thing that we do and have done in the past is we try to go out and meet with our individual district administrators and superintendents. There have been times when we've actually presented the data at public board meetings so the whole community can hear what's going on and involve them in some of the conversation. And so that will be a next step for us as well, to get that information out. Every school district will receive the same report that we just saw a few minutes ago. And again, the follow-up from us to have a discussion, should they choose to. And they have the option to talk to their public and release our county data that way as well. And we are always make ourselves available to come and present and or answer questions. So
We've always had interest from law enforcement too. Collaboratively, are we seeing what they're seeing and vice versa? And so we'll be sharing this with them and talking about some of the prevention efforts that they're obviously involved in the community too.
Oh, that might make a great future podcast for us.
Oh,
yes.
That could be a discussion held there. I know this morning we just reached out to Wood County, and they're going to do some compliance checks in alcohol and
Right.
tobacco.
Yeah.
So,
And the other great thing that the survey data gives us is the opportunity that as state and federal grants become available, we have had great success at applying and receiving and being awarded those grants because of the data we have to back up our statements. When, if there's an issue or a grant that's coming out on mental health, suicide prevention, we're going to have numbers and statistics and figures that can say, yes, we have this level, we think with prevention we can make these gains or lower this number, and we've been pretty successful over the years at doing that.
It's funny you should mention compliance checks, and I've been here long enough that the first time we worked with law enforcement to do compliance checks, and just everybody doesn't know, compliance checks are where law enforcement will use a underage looking person to go in and try and buy beer at a carryout. Now they have a variety of vices they can choose from. We can try and buy a beer, we can try and buy some vaping devices, we can buy some lottery tickets and scratch up. Or we could try and redeem a ticket and see if that would be redeemed. We saw that a large percentage of high school age kids said they buy lottery tickets and scratch offs. Well, they're not allowed to buy them. Are they getting them from grandma in their birthday card, or are they getting them somewhere else? And if they win, can they redeem it? So those are part of that compliance check now that
yes,
we need to be seeing.
they actually asked about the gambling piece, which I can't support with the drug-free communities dollars, but we do have other dollars here in the agency that can be utilized in that way.
Right.
Any final thoughts from anyone about?
One final thought I have about the survey is this could be the last time we did it paper and pencil. Many of the kids, 5th graders, 6th graders, had never done paper pencil. They've been online since they started. And a lot of schools didn't have Chromebooks and laptops for their kids. And then the pandemic hit, now everyone has them and they rely on them more. So I think our delivery system in the future might need to be more online than paper and pencil with a lot of things.
And the research we've done shows that it's as effective.
Yeah, Michigan did scrambled, and they did this survey online, the first time ever. And before they went online, they did their own study with a group that they gave paper and pencil and the same another randomized sample online, and compared their results to see did it produce the same kind of information, and it did. So they felt that online was just as reliable as paper and pencil.
So we're trending differently that way.
Yes.
Well, go ahead.
That's nice because we're really limited right now. Not that we want to extend the survey and make it too long. We want it to be done in one class period, but we're really stuck with the size it can be right now being on paper. So that gives us a little bit of leeway or font or I don't know, make it easier to read.
Yes.
I'll just support too what Kyle said. I know with the Drug-Free Communities Grant, we have to match with non-federal dollars. And so I've written 3 grants here in the last few months, and every one of them I have used either data from the last survey or some of the data we collected this summer from focus groups and such.
Okay.
This data is so useful in so many ways.
We have a couple of different links for those in the community who want to look at this in depth. But the full report and all of the data that we have will be online and released on the 23rd of February. It'll be on our Wood County Educational Service Center's website. It'll also be on the link will be made to the coalition, the Prevention Coalition's website. So I encourage anyone who wants to look at all this stuff in detail to jump in there and go at it.
What fun.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, everyone.
thank you.